Welcome back to the Argentina Project Podcast. I'm your host, Benjamin Gadan, here at the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars Latin American Program. We are pleased to include in today's discussion Damien Bio of The Bubble. He's the senior political writer in Buenos Aires, and he is leading their coverage of the Cuadernos, of this notebook scandal.
This, the investigators believe, is only the beginning.
The corruption notebook case.
Los cuadernos de la corrupción.
A burgeoning corruption scandal.
With politicians and several leading business people arrested in a corruption scandal they say involves millions of dollars and threatens to reach the very top.
I'm going to let Damien give us a little background on the scandal. I'm sure you, our listeners, are aware of it, but this, of course, is the notes from a chauffeur who, during many years, late Nestor Kirchner and virtually the entire period of Cristina Fernández de Kirchner's administrations in Argentina, had been chronicling alleged bribery at a massive scale, tens of millions of dollars. The revelations which have come out in the last few days have shaken the Argentine political system and have had some tentative economic consequences as well. Damien, what did I miss in terms of the context and significance of this scandal?
Well, first of all, hello, Benjamin. Thank you for having me. Well, you gave a pretty good summary. This scandal is unfolding every day. Ever since it surfaced about 2 weeks ago, we've just keep getting more and more news by the day. And in fact, today, if I may, before going back to explain the whole context a bit, former President Cristina Fernández de Kirchner had to appear before the judge, Claudio Bonadío, to testify regarding her alleged involvement in this case.
Cristina Kirchner had no words for the Argentine press as she headed to federal court in Buenos Aires. On social media, however, the nation's former president was clear in her denunciation of what she's called politically motivated charges.
Going back, this investigation surfaced as a result of a journalistic investigation by La Nación, one of the country's largest newspapers, where the journalist Diego Cabot got a box with these notebooks that you talked about describing the corruption scheme. He got them back in January, but instead of deciding to publish the information himself, he decided to work along with a prosecutor, Carlos Estornelli, to be able to then move forward legally with this information. Ever since, they basically published the story the moment the first raids and detainments were being conducted. That happened about 2 weeks ago, and ever since, the legal case has been moving forward. At the same time, the news site La Nación has been providing more information about the scandal as well.
Let me ask you a question about the politics, since that's one of your major focuses, Damien. I was interviewed for a Bloomberg story recently, and the premise of that story was that the high-profile abortion debate in Argentina and now this corruption scandal were effectively distracting Argentines from a very difficult economic period, including some negative growth. My view was that that won't last for long, and fundamentally, the politics of Argentina will be driven by the economy and whether it recovers in time for the 2019 presidential elections. Others disagree and think that this may, in fact, really insulate the president, at least for now, from the difficult economic moment. Damien, what have you observed so far in Argentina in terms of the effects of this scandal on the national conversation?
First of all, I agree. I think ultimately the Argentine people will vote according with the economic situation at the time of the elections next year. But everything is happening really quickly here. For the last 2 weeks, the notebooks conversation and the abortion voting on Wednesday especially, they did in fact take over the political conversation. And we can actually see an example today, because as we are speaking now, the central bank announced a measure regarding the Levax, the tenders, basically imposing some restrictions. But I am here in the office now. The main issue, the main TV stations are talking about is the Cristina's appearance before Judge Bonadío. So I do think there is a bit of difference between the current day-to-day news cycle and then what will effectively happen in the election. I think President Macri was a bit insulated, as you said, by this news. But at the same time, the negative economic news continue to pile up. And that is extremely hard to cover, regardless of the magnitude of any scandal or the abortion bill that happened last Wednesday.
The 2015 election of President Mauricio Macri was to some degree driven by, perceptions already at the time of corruption in the Cristina administration and, public exhaustion with corruption. Now we're a few years into the Macri administration. Is anti-corruption still a viable political brand for Cambiemos coalition, for the pro party and for the president? And if so, does this help fuel that into another election cycle?
I think it could definitely be a possibility, but in a different way now, because for the first maybe 2 years of the Macri administration and in the presidential campaign, as you said, one of the main narratives used by Cambiemos was the endemic corruption plaguing the Argentine political landscape and their ability to change it, as well as the effects that had in the economy. 3 years after, maybe next year in the campaign, it will be a bit more complicated, I think, to basically blame the economic woes on the previous administration. But at the same time, I think it would be plausible for them to polarize with Cristina Kirchner or other candidates who might run by saying that they will not be able to solve what they destroyed in the first place.
But Damien, just returning to corruption as a political asset for the Macri government, I think he's very much still seen in the international community as a good governance, clean individual running a pretty honest and transparent administration. Is that how he's still seen in Argentina? We know in Argentina, there's been some campaign finance questions in the province of Buenos Aires with the governor, a key ally of the president. Some members of the president's cabinet were found to have some offshore accounts that raised some concerns. Do you get a sense that the Argentine voters still see Mauricio Macri as a good governance, transparent, anti-corruption crusader, enough so that he can run on anti-corruption again, potentially?
I think in this case, many people might not perceive him as transparent, but that also runs along party lines. So maybe someone who would vote for Cambiemos would base their argument saying that the Kirchners are extremely more corrupt and vice versa. So it is interesting to see how the political division in Argentina basically leads people to focus on different corruption scandals, because supporters of Cristina Kirchner and her party, they focus a lot more on this financing campaign scandal that you mentioned. And it happens the same thing on the other side of the proverbial grieta, as we call it.
Damien Bio, chief political correspondent at The Bubble in Buenos Aires, joining the Argentina Project Podcast for our discussion of the notebook scandal in Argentina. Damien, thank you so much.
Thank you, Benjamin.
Today's episode was produced, edited, and engineered by Sam Aladef. You can find previous episodes of the Argentina Project's podcast on SoundCloud.